This first reading is from Whispers from Eternity by Paramhansa Yogananda, a book of prayer poems. And this one is entitled, Tune Us, That We May Hear Thy Voice. Volumes of thy Savior voice resound through the loudspeaker of every loving heart. The voice of thy wisdom roams through the ether of space, seeking everywhere hearts that are tuned to ecstasy. Sadly, thy warning sermons pass unheard by souls deafened with the static of sense pleasures. O divine broadcaster, tune our souls, long distracted by the static of our indifference. Fine-tune us with the delicate touch of soul perception. Grant us the privilege of hearing thy magic melodies in the ecstasy of divine awakening. And this reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda. These are parallel commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita. This week's reading is entitled, The Mystery of Avatara, or Divine Incarnation. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. The Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter states, as we saw last week, O Bharata, whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I incarnate on earth. Taking visible form, I come to destroy evil and re-establish virtue. What is the mystery of this divine manifestation? Great avatars such as Krishna and Jesus Christ are born as babies, even as we all are. They take human form and go through normal human experiences as they grow from childhood to adulthood. They eat, they play, they may seem to suffer sickness and disappointment like the rest of us. In what way are they different from other human beings? The important thing to understand is that even as they are like us, so we also are like them. Their realization can be ours too. They come on earth to show us our own divine potential. The difference lies not in the manner of their manifestation on earth, but in the consciousness with which they are born. All things are condensations, so to speak, of the cosmic vibration, Om, described by St. John's Gospel as the Word in the Bible. Most human beings, however, are unconscious of their own divine origin. Are unconscious of their divine origin. The avatars, on the other hand, come consciously as manifestations of that divine reality. As the Gospel in the Bible says in the 1st chapter, And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. It's nice to be in these readings again, which of course we do throughout the year. They have a certain pattern that Swamiji laid them out in so that so many topics of the spiritual path are covered and in a coherent way. You've even heard how it said, like we studied last week. Actually, we didn't study that one last week. We studied week number 1 because we always skip week number 1 every year because of either New Year's Day or Master's birthday sort of takes up the headlines for that Sunday. So we thought it's good once in a while to read week number 1. But you could say the first early readings of this book, of this year, talk about the nature of this universe, how God created it. We talked about that last week and so on. But then we see that already it becomes very personal in a way when we talk about avatars, Avatara, the descent. Literally, that's what avatar means in English, descent. Descent from above, certainly, but God sends help. That's what this means. Whenever virtue declines and vice predominates, I incarnate myself on earth. And when we take that in just sort of a literal way or a social way, or if we read too many headlines in the newspapers, we may say, okay, well, where are you then? Because it seems like now would be a good time. Did you hear about this scandal? So please, va. But the thing is that honestly, I don't know if there is a time when people don't feel that way. I think there's a little more chaos now than usual, but I remember listening to a recording of Swamiji talking to a group, and they were talking about the difficulties of the President of America was creating this turmoil, and there was also these other things, and people weren't being sincere, and that recording was from 1964. And it was a really clear recording. It was recorded on the reel-to-reel tape, so it was crystal clear. So it didn't even sound like, a recording that's, 50 years old or more, 60? It sounded just like they were in the room, but same thing. And as I've shared with you all before, a story that Swamiji told, that he read of some letters or some things that had been deciphered from ancient Egypt. And there was a letter. It turned out they found some things, and it turned out to be, one was a letter from the father to the son. And the father said, "You don't write to me enough." And the son wrote back, "Send more money." Some things are universal, timeless, eternal. You see, ancient hieroglyphics, we see the people, and they're basically saying, send more money. And why not give a few idlis also? It's really the human. The other thing to remember is if we have lived many lives, maybe we lived lives then. And if we did, we were pretty much the same people. Maybe speaking a different language from now, but not speaking a different language from each other, and having the same hunger pains and the same sore leg and the same wish that life could be even better than it is. That's what prods us to grow. And so, to put it another way, many lives from now we may be flying in saucers, UFOs, and they won't be UFOs if they're our own. They will be identified flying objects. But maybe Bharat pulls up to Ravi in the spaceship and says, and then we go on. Same thing. So at a certain point, we have to ask ourselves, when is it time to graduate? And that's what the avatars come to show us. Now, we have to understand, avatars come to uplift earth generally. They have that power. That's what makes them avatars. As opposed to, for example, your guru may come and to help you, and your guru will be basically that avatar, but for you, to help you to be uplifted. And your guru may be an avatar, may not be an avatar, and it doesn't really matter. It's sort of, your guru is your guru. Have you said to your father, I wish you could have been CEO of Google. That would have been better for me. Your father is your father. Your mother is your mother. They may have prominence in the world's eyes too, but they first belong to you. And so your guru first belongs to you, even if he is an avatar. Now, or she. Now, Master explained it this way, that when the avatars come to free us, for us to come to be liberated through their blessings, God's blessings, and our own effort, mind you. All those three ingredients are needed. And mind you, the one ingredient that we have control over is the one we're responsible for, our own effort. So the avatars come to lead the way to what? But there's a state, it's described as in Sanskrit, to become a jivan mukta. And what that means is, Master translated it into English as freed while living. And Swamiji and Master explained it as, our first step, our first step is to overcome the ego. We'll take that as a statement. There's a lot of reasons for that and so on. Let me give one. We understand sort of abstractly that it is karma that is somehow holding us back. And the first problem with karma that we have is not only the karma that has been generated in the past, but the karma that we are generating even now. And so what is it that creates new karma? It's the ego. Why? Because every karma that we have is in the form of a thought, I want or I don't want. There's some desire. In other words, when we act with desire, when we think with desire, it generates a karma. It's not a punishment, it's not a bad thing. It generates an energy that then has to be completed, that then has to be fulfilled. It's sort of like sending a prayer request out, I want this, and then basically until we get it, there is that little pinch. Sometimes consciously, that pinch on our happiness. We see something, we want it, and suddenly we're not as happy because, adavenum. And then only when it comes, then okay. And Swamiji has described it as when we have a desire, it's like pinching ourselves. And suddenly we have this discomfort. Finally that desire is fulfilled, Chanabhatura comes from Swiggy, and then, we let go of the pinch, and then we feel so good. But it's just the relief. It is an unpinch. And so sometimes Dharmini and I will say to each other, whenever something happens that we were thinking about or worrying about or wanting to have happen, and then it happens and we say, oh, wonderful, unpinch. Because that's all it is. It was probably going to happen anyway. It didn't need our worrying about it. And so it's our way of sort of poking fun at ourselves that that's all that has happened, is we have decided to stop pinching. Now, it is the ego generating this karma, and the first step we want to do to achieve freedom is to stop generating new karma. And when we overcome the ego, then we no longer generate new karma. And what does that mean? It really means offering the ego into the infinite. It doesn't mean necessarily fighting the ego, though that's often necessary, but it's only to get the ego to see that the ultimate joy is not only in outward things, but is ultimately only in God. And we can find that out through a lot of experimentation. But ultimately we feel that must be. It's the only thing we can count on. So when we attain this state, we become jivan muktas. We are no longer generating new karma. And this is the state of you could say it's the first stage of a saint. And I don't know how to really quantify this, but it is the stage of most saints. And I justify that by saying that Swamiji asked Master, of those in the autobiography of a yogi, all the saints that he met, he said, basically, were how many, not how many, but was this one liberated, jivan mukta, or fully liberated, is paramukta in Sanskrit, and I'll explain that sort of next stage. But by and large, Master said, liberated, not yet fully liberated. In other words, jivan mukta, not yet paramukta, for almost all of them. And then, so what is the difference? First of all, there is no difference. When you're one with God, you're one with God, that's it. You don't see the saints saying, I'm a little more one with God than you are. No, one means one. But when we have overcome the ego, we're not generating new karma, but we do have past karma to clear out. That is finite now, because we're not adding to it anymore. Mind you, this is not sort of step one on the spiritual path, but since it's the topic, I wanted to explain it. So then, when we work out that past karma, also, then we become, as Master put it, fully liberated, or paramukta. And so, when such a soul comes to earth, then, let me check this to make sure someone's not saying the microphone is off and so on. Okay, no. All right. When we come to earth, when such a soul comes to earth fully liberated, then they come as an avatar. And they usually come with a divine mission. In other words, before that stage, though one with God and though liberated, the saint still comes to earth to work out karma, because there is that past karma. And so Swamiji asked Master a very obvious but necessary question to understand. If you're one with God, can't you just say, I see all my past karma and I see that it was God doing it and I don't identify with it, and just in one moment dump the whole thing and basically be free? And Master said you can. But really in that state, he said, you don't care. You're already happy enough. This is sort of like some little tiny ITR issue that has to be resolved, and not a big deal. And so he said that the saint usually uses that karma as an excuse to come to earth and to work with others, to help to take on disciples, to help them to grow also. And then at another time, Master made a very interesting statement. He said that you have to help, a Jivan Mukta has to help 6 others to attain that same state, to become Jivan Muktas, before that guru, you could say, can move on to become Paramukta. Very interesting. Why should it be 6? 5 is not enough. 7 is extra credit. I don't know. But that other people have to be involved. And he mentioned this in connection with a story of, which I won't go into the whole thing, but basically some yogis were discovered in Delhi when they were trying to build some new building. They found some yogis buried underground underneath. This happens in India. They just, oops, sorry, were you meditating there? And anyway, so the short of it is, the yogis were upset that they had been disturbed from their meditation. This happened in Master's father's lifetime. This happened, and he read about it in the newspaper and so on. And but Master commented that yes, those yogis were disturbed, but on the other hand, Divine Mother also disturbed them through these people, because he said God doesn't want anyone to just find God on their own without also helping others. You could say it's kind of like a pyramid scheme where you're a saint and then you have to sign up 6 other saints before you can move on. Thank God, because otherwise some lucky souls may make it and the rest of us are just left with nothing. So this gives us, of course, very practical teachings. First of all, that we need to be serving, to be sharing, to be helping others, and that helps us to grow. That was, interestingly, the affirmation for today, sharing. What I give to others, I give not away, for in my greater reality it remains ever mine. I am happy in the happiness of all. And you really feel that. In addition to, as Swamiji said, one very easy reason to serve others is that it helps us not just think all the time about ourselves. It's a relief. Just to say, would you like some tea? And not to be thinking, well, would I like some tea? Just to be giving, to be sharing, and it relaxes the heart too, and we also feel connected. So giving is very much a protection. That's one thing to remember too, if you're feeling the need for more protection, is to give. Because in that giving energy also, just vibrationally, your aura will be stronger because you're concentrating on what I am sharing, not on what is coming or not coming to me. Of course, in the giving, more will be attracted to you because it creates a flow of energy. It may not happen exactly with the person you're giving to, if it is one person. It may not come back from them. It may or may not. It'll come back from somewhere. When Jesus was entering into this one city and his disciples were cheering and saying different things, basically the equivalent of Jai Guru. And some of the priests said this is very disruptive because they didn't like it because they weren't saying Jai Guru to them. And so he said, if you silence these, the very stones would cry out. And so, in other words, the energy will come from somewhere. Just that wonderful story of Gyaneshwar, where he started to say a sloka, and the Brahmin said, no, you're impure, you can't say that. Then they covered up his mouth, and the bull nearby finished the sloka for him. And so they said, okay, we better rethink this. So, we have to understand that the avatars, when they come, now that we know the state of their realization, what's the difference? I said they're all one with God, and so Paramukta, what's different? Master said you can't really judge, you can't compare saints because they're one with God. That's it. But if you are going to compare, you could compare the sort of outer manifestation of their work on earth. Because that is just, you could say, in this realm of Maya. And what does Maya even mean? In English, the measurer, that which measures, in order to separate. This is taller, this is shorter. As soon as we evaluate, we judge. That's really how Maya gets us. But the key word is not only measure, but separation. And that sense of separation. Not just that I'm separate from other people, which is not helpful, but also I'm separate from God, which is the most unhelpful thought. So think of the helpful thought. God is here. God is with me. You can say, God is in me, sure. You want to feel it. Whatever makes the heart feel works. And in yoga, we do what works. That's the motto. That's the philosophy. That's the mantra. Do what works. And so if something is supposed to be the greatest, but it doesn't work for you, then find what does. And so recently a friend was telling me on the phone that her relative of hers sat her down and said, why do you follow this guru with such fanatical devotion? We only need gurus. We only needed gurus in the old days because we didn't have books. This is a common argument you find nowadays. In the old days, they didn't have knowledge written down. You could only get it from someone who knew it. Now we have books, so you don't need gurus. As if that's what a guru gives you. A guru doesn't give you information or teaching only. A guru gives you power, spiritual power. Just as a parent will share wealth with their children first, usually. So the spiritual parent shares his or her spiritual wealth with the children first. Why? Because the children, in the spiritual case, the disciples say, I want help. And I'm open to receive it. That's really all that is needed to be a disciple, is to say, I want help. I want your help. This is a way that works for me, meaning a spiritual path that works for me. You've got to find one that works for you, as I just said. So anyway, he was challenging her, saying, you isn't reading enough. And besides, there's so much more to read. And she said, well, and she's a very accomplished intellectual, person, a former professor of chemistry and all these things. It's not as if she doesn't have a brain and hasn't used it for a long time. But she said, my criterion for all the things that I do to grow, whether it be reading or practicing yoga, meditating, is that I should change at least 1%. Somehow, the things that I'm learning, I should be able to put into practice. And she said, so for that, I have found devotion to my guru is very effective. That works. And so she didn't say, and reading is not working, but she just left it as that. And after some repetition of this, her relative became convinced that there could be two right answers. He said, I came here convinced that you had to come to my side, but now I see that your answer is valid also. Which again is a beautiful thing about life, which can be seen very often in India more than in Western cultures, is this concept of both and, as opposed to either or. How something A can be true and B can be true, as opposed to the attitude that says, no, what is the one true single meaning? The best, the only. No, there are many applications of that, of truth. Why? Because when something is true, it's usually at the center of reality. And from that center, it connects in many different directions, as opposed to just thinking it all boils down to one thing. If it has to boil down to one thing, it boils down to God, or boils up to God. So that is a simple answer at the heart of everything. But the avatars come, as it says in the reading, not to show us how great they are, but to show us what we can become. What would be the point? And I should finish that thought. If we're judging the work of a saint, Master said an avatar without that past karma now can manifest much more of God's power on earth. You could say they are sort of a clear channel without any leftover baggage, and so much more power comes in. He said, whereas most saints come and they really can only help their disciples, an avatar can uplift the whole world. And we've seen that in the lives of Krishna and Jesus and Buddha and other avatars Master mentioned. Interestingly, he mentioned also, he said the ancient avatars of India include Krishna, Rama, Buddha, and Patanjali. I mean, that's a pretty impressive club to be a part of. I mean, we knew Patanjali was great, but he called him an avatar. So, wow. Well, and why not? I mean, having put the Yoga Sutras, the yoga science, so clearly that not only we are following, but he said every human on earth is following, and probably if there are people elsewhere, they would also come and find out about Patanjali. You know, you too need to merge with the divine, and this is how you do it. And not saying because you do sort of, some breathing exercise only, but that your whole goal is to overcome just what I was saying, karma and so on, to merge with God, needing to know that's what's ahead of us. So, Master said it would do no good if the avatars were not first people like us who had overcome. Jesus said that, as you overcome, even as I overcame. Sort of putting himself in the same shoes as his listeners, saying, look, I've graduated. You haven't yet, but you will. As opposed to God creating some perfect being, robot, and saying, go around and just instruct people. He said it would be perfectly useless, because there would be nothing to do but to worship such a creation and say, well, lucky you were created perfect, I wasn't, and there it is. But he said, these are people like us who have taken the same journey and then are showing us that just as I have done, so you can do. Of course, we revere them also as that channel through which God came to us. We think of them as divine. We feel that great gratitude and respect. We don't say, yeah, how you doing? You're just like me, just a little better. No, great reverence because of the help that they give us. But we must remember, as Swamiji said, as they are like us, so we are like them, ultimately. Swamiji, when he came to Master, he was quite young. Swamiji was quite young. He was 22. And Master had him teaching. And in those days, the only people in America who came were in their 40s and 50s of age, much older. Now, in India we find all ages, and now in America there's sort of been cycles of older people, younger people, older people. I think it's a mix too now. But then Swamiji was teaching people who were twice his age, and so Master suggested to him that he grow a beard. And nobody wore beards in those days at all. In fact, Swamiji would say that sometimes he'd be walking down the street and people would shout out, Fidel Castro, because he was the only one people knew of who wore a beard. And but because of this, perhaps, Swamiji was approached by some people saying where in their organization they were having some sort of pageant, a sort of a display or a silent play, and they wanted him to play the part of Jesus, and maybe because of the beard. And so Swamiji played this part, and afterwards, Master told him when they were alone that I heard from many of the people there, they said that you looked like Jesus. And Swamiji said, well, sir, I'd much rather be like Jesus than look like Jesus. And so he was saying it just, as a witty remark, though sincere. And Master said, that will come. And Swamiji was surprised, but Master was taking it seriously. In other words, that will come, and we should remember that will come for all of us. That we shouldn't say, no, that has come, actually. It will come. Remember what Master said, he who says he is God isn't, and he who says he isn't. So the thing is that it will come, though. We should always identify ourselves with that. I was saying earlier this morning, we shouldn't identify with the things that are going wrong or the things we've done in the past. Master said that, and Swamiji added, if we want to think of ourselves at all, we should identify ourselves with our aspiration, what we're wanting. In other words, the direction we're going in, not wherever we presently are. First of all, we have no way of knowing where we actually are. We don't know all of our past karma. We don't know if this one habit that we have that's very difficult is one of the last ones left. But even if it isn't, if it's one of 100 left or 1,000 left, who cares? Just keep going. But because we are wanting to be better, we are wanting to grow. Find ways to do it. Find ways that work. Find ways that are effective. Remember, we don't have a lot of time in this world. I don't mean years. I mean in a day. How much time do we really have to call our own? So whatever we do have to devote to God, let us make sure it's working. It's worth it to us. How do you know? Because you check the mirror and there's a smile once in a while, and then more and more frequently. How do you know it's not working? The reverse. You look in the mirror and the mirror cracks. No, not that bad. But just to say, the face looking back is not a face you would want to meet. And so, does anyone else want to? You see, there's no reason for us to live with burdened hearts. But it often feels like there is. And so we have to sometimes work that out directly. What is it that's bothering me? Sometimes we just meditate, we just chant, we just be with other positive people, and it just lifts. So we have to find those things that help us. But remember, whenever somebody criticizes you or through something you feel sort of left out or unloved or whatever, that's not God. That's not how God sees you. And that maybe God is the only one who's loving you in this moment, but that's enough. Because that's all that there is, and that's what we ourselves will become. And then let us also share our joy, our peace, our kindness, our patience with others. Because this world is suffering quite a lot. And it isn't our job to uplift the whole world. That's why the avatars come. And yet, at the same time, let's do what we can to help them in their work. And do it also, though, with the understanding that everyone belongs to God. Maybe you can help. Maybe in some cases you can't. God is always helping. Let us also help along with God, but not feel responsible in that way. God is asking us to be responsible for ourselves, and that includes helping others. But ultimately, God is watching everyone, helping everyone through their tests. Okay, and so let's all find God together. God bless you.